So this activity is a card game that provides a really nice analogy for the scientific method. Two of the more prominent TOK concepts in this activity are evidence and certainty, although depending on where you take the discussion, you might touch on a number of others. The simple premise of this card game is that students are trying to guess a pattern that the teacher has chosen but has not told anyone. So as a little bit of an explanation of how this game works, you're going to divide your class into groups of probably 2, 3, maybe 4 students max. Let's take 3 groups in this example, and the teacher's probably going to stand somewhere in the middle. And the important resource for this game is going to be a pack of cards. So you can shuffle the cards and you can do it in front of students so they don't get suspicious of anything, and then you're going to just split the pack around the groups as you like. Let's take 3 cards for each group, something like this. Once you've handed out the cards to the groups, and they might organise the cards in colours or suits, it doesn't really matter at this stage, you're then going to think of a pattern as the teacher in your head. And for round 1 I would normally go for a simple pattern. Perhaps you are going to choose a pattern of red, black, red, black. And once you've decided on a pattern, you are going to rotate around the different groups, and each time you arrive at one of their tables they can offer you 1 card. If the card fits your pattern, you will accept it and take it away. If it doesn't fit your pattern, you will reject it and give it back to them. So for example, if I was the teacher and I'd chosen a pattern of red, black, I might move over to or start at group 1, and they might offer me the 10 of hearts. Now because it's a red card, I'm going to accept that card, take it away from them. I'm then going to move round to group 2. Perhaps they offer me the 6 of spades, and because my pattern was red, black, and I've already accepted a red, I am going to accept this black 6 of spades, so I can take the card away from them and then move around to group 3. When I get to group 3, let's imagine they offer me the ace of spades, and unfortunately for them that does not fit my pattern. I would be accepting a red card next, so I would tell everyone that I'm rejecting the card. And it's worth mentioning that each time you accept or reject a card, you can show all of the other groups, and probably the majority of students will have picked up the idea that they might want to record this data so that they can try and track and identify a pattern. After you've done 1 full rotation around all of the tables, the groups can now, instead of offering a card, try to guess the pattern in your head. However, if they guess incorrectly, they do not also get to offer a card. You simply move round to the next group. And in short, you keep rotating around the groups until one of the groups guesses correctly. This activity is normally pretty good to do perhaps 2 or maybe 3 different patterns. So I'd start with an easy one and then maybe move on to slightly more difficult ones. Here's some examples you could use. So here are some of the easier patterns, maybe just accept a single colour or a suit or a number. You could go for alternating red, blacks, odds, evens, or maybe rotating through the different suits. And you might start to make it more difficult in the second round by choosing a range of cards, perhaps between 7 and 10. Now, of course, you could complicate this by adding 2 rules at the same time, but for the sake of time, I would keep it to just 1. When you want to step it up and make a kind of significant difference to the difficulty level, you might choose some of the following examples that kind of demonstrate a paradigm shift in terms of how we understand the game. So, for example, you might only accept cards that are handed to you with a student's left hand, or maybe a right hand. You might accept from students who are wearing glasses. And the point of this is to demonstrate that actually, to understand these patterns, we need a whole change in our perspective, because the pattern no longer has anything to do with what's on the card. It's about something completely different. So what kind of discussions and outcomes might we see from this game? As a first point for discussion, I would normally, perhaps even before round 1, or certainly if not before it, then afterwards, ask the class, ask the groups about possible features they're aware of in a scientific method. And they might suggest things like observation, hypotheses, predictions, experimentation, data, confirmation, falsification, peer review. And the aim is, once you've identified some of these features, to try and find analogies in the card game. As a basic example, before anyone can start guessing the pattern, we need some observation. We might collect data recording what's on the cards that are being accepted. A second point that might be worth discussion is that students usually assume this game is a group competition. And I'm quite careful when I'm setting up the task simply to tell the class that they need to guess the pattern, and I'm never explicit about who or with who or in what teams. And it's quite a useful analogy for science, because although we kind of like the idea that all scientists are working together for the greater good, there are certainly elements of competition, human ego, emotion, power, stuff like that amongst the scientific community. So it's worth considering whether this competition is a help or a hindrance, perhaps, in our pursuit of knowledge. A third possible point, which is kind of an important one for the natural sciences, is to ask the students if, as in the universe, there is no teacher to confirm the pattern, how much evidence is enough? You might question if we can ever be certain of these patterns that we're looking for in the universe if no one's there to actually tell us they exist. And underlying both of these questions is perhaps pondering whether the natural sciences are actually dependent on an assumption that there are rules that exist in the universe. And as a fourth possible point for discussion, it's worth reflecting on the pattern that was unrelated to the cards themselves. Perhaps you accepted cards from students who gave it to you with their left hand. And we might try and relate this to the idea of paradigm shifts in sciences. The classic example that TOK students tend to talk about is the shift from the geocentric theory of the universe to the heliocentric theory of the universe. And it's a good demonstration of big shifts in perspectives in science. Of course, there are many other discussion points you might use, but these are some of my favourites, and that will probably do it for the card game. Hopefully this video is of some help.